These concessions are not insignificant. It's a question of giving up 20% of Ukraine plus 12 additional percent of territories Russia does not occupy right now. It's taken them almost 4 years to go kilometers into the Donetsk, hinterlands, and Russia wants all of Donetsk, all of Luhansk, half of of Zaporizhia, half of Kherson province, all of Crimea, and then wants it all to be declared Russia. Uh, for the Ukrainians, they're fighting an armed force that is pretty close to being spent. The Russian forces are not as strong as they look.
Tonight, President Trump said his team has made tremendous progress in the efforts to end the war in Ukraine. In a post on Truth Social, he said there are only a few remaining points of disagreement. He's sending his envoy Steve Witkoff to meet President Putin and his Army Secretary Dan Driscoll to meet officials in Kyiv. Trump added that he looked forward to meeting the leaders of Ukraine and Russia soon, but only when a deal has been agreed or is in its final stages. He spoke of his optimism.
We're working on that final war. It's not easy, but I don't know. I think we're going to get there. 25,000 soldiers, Ukraine, Russia. In the last month, 25,000 soldiers have died. So I think we're getting very close to a deal. We'll find out. I thought that one would have been gone quicker.
Earlier on the programme, I spoke to Alexander Kara, former advisor to the Minister of Defence in Ukraine and executive director at the Centre for Defence Strategies. He cast doubt on the chances of agreement.
I don't understand why there is so much optimism in Europe and in the United States, because nothing has changed from the point of view of Mr. Putin.
Well, Malcom Nance is a former US Navy officer who fought in Ukraine with the International Legion of Territorial Defence. Good evening to you, Malcolm.
Good evening.
What do you make of what we're hearing tonight? Lots of positive signals coming from the White House. President Trump himself in that latest post on Truth Social saying that there's only a few remaining points of disagreement. What do you make of what he's saying there?
Well, first, you need to understand how Donald Trump does his art of the deal. And we've been seeing that play out over the last 10 months. And of course, it culminates to where it always culminates, which is a series of promises and coercions that generally don't come to an agreement. First, he started out by cutting ties with Ukraine, bullying them, trying to, get them to compromise. Then he did a series of carrots and sticks with Russia, sent his negotiator, Steve Witkoff, who was a billionaire real estate mogul, to meet with Putin numerous times, and it's culminated into the United States being handed a series of 28 points that Russia gave to the United States. Witkoff presented as an American plan, and it was almost the exact same plan that Putin proposed in June of 2022, minus one or two details. So now it's been whittled down from a 28-point plan to a 19-point plan, and there's very little optimism with the actual negotiators. President Zelensky says it's a good start of a framework. His chief negotiator, one of his chief negotiators, is Kirill Budanov, the head of Ukrainian Defense Intelligence, who is a very hard liner. So I think Trump just wants to have a deal. He doesn't care what the end state or how it would impact the people on either side.
Well, as you pointed out, that original 28-point plan, which many people looked at and said, look, this basically just amounts to surrender by Ukraine, because they'd have to agree to limits on the size of their armed forces, to give up territory to Russia, which has not even managed to gain control of yet, to give up some of its most powerful weapons, to agree to no foreign troops on its soil, even to have Russia as the official language. I mean, that looked pretty unacceptable. Trump says it's been fine-tuned. We've had that meeting between European allies, the UK and others. Do you think they've reached a point where they've got something that could be acceptable to Ukraine?
Well, first off, you would have to look at the mindset of the Ukrainian people themselves. They've sacrificed a lot, and I speak to my battalion on a daily basis, the Ukrainian officers as well, and as a nation, they are dead set on not surrendering any lands that was originally Ukraine. President Zelensky himself has said it. He said that I cannot actually authorize the transfer of land of the people of Ukraine. That would have to go to a referendum or it would have to go to the Ukrainian parliament. And overwhelmingly, the Ukrainian people have paid for their own land in blood. And as many as 100,000 civilians and soldiers on the Ukrainian side may have died. It would literally reward Russia with the city of Mariupol, in which we know there are 35,000 dead civilians from the initial invasion. They're not going to pay for that in blood, and they are more than willing to continue fighting.
But
President Trump doesn't seem to
President,
understand that.
yeah, but President Zelensky
Mm,
has also since then indicated that Ukraine may have to face up to the difficult prospect of giving up some of the territory that is currently occupied by Russia. I mean, do you think President Zelensky, who has also, of course, got this huge problem of a corruption scandal overshadowing his administration, do you think
mm.
that he is prepared now to make or try to make, if he can get it through the Ukrainian people, significant concessions?
I don't think that he's going to make those concessions. I don't think that he feels that he can go to the Ukrainian people with those concessions. These concessions are not insignificant. It's a question of giving up 20% of Ukraine plus 12 additional percent of territories Russia does not occupy right now. It's taken them almost 4 years to go kilometers into the Donetsk, hinterlands, and Russia wants all of Donetsk, all of Luhansk, half of of Zaporizhia, half of Kherson province, all of Crimea, and then wants it all to be declared Russia. Uh, for the Ukrainians, they're fighting an armed force that is pretty close to being spent. The Russian forces are not as strong as they look. They actually have to coerce and they execute their own people. At any time, Ukraine could decide they're going to continue fighting. The United States is positioning itself, which is what Trump is doing. He's more interested not in stopping the bloodshed. He's interested in the $500 billion of potential cash, gold that's in the Ukrainian banks that are sanctioned right now. And so the Ukrainians aren't going to make a quick deal. As President Zelensky said just today, it's a good start for a framework, but it is not going to be a comprehensive peace any day now, unless he decides to surrender the country.
We've also had the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer talking to allies in this so-called coalition of the willing. Now, these are nations which have indicated that they might be prepared to give some sort of guarantees if there is a peace deal. Keir Starmer is reported to have said that he wants to be able to allow Britain to send troops to Ukraine to provide this reassurance force. How
Right.
realistic do you think is this idea of a force of UK and other coalition of the willing partners to try to guarantee any kind of peace deal, even if we could get beyond these very serious issues which you've outlined over territory?
Sure. And, we have this horrific temptation to repeat history that has failed us many times before. This would essentially create a demilitarized zone on the current line of contact, equal to the demarcation between North Korea and South Korea. So you would create a Russia-Ukraine demilitarized zone, which at any time the politics of European nations could get soft and they could withdraw. Let me tell you, I've been on the zero line many times. It is 5,000 men is laughable. That's almost one Ukrainian army brigade, of which the Ukrainians have 850,000 men and women in uniform, fighting on this battle line. So it would be like saying they're going to station one policeman to guard the entire East End of London. It's not something that's feasible, and Russia knows this, but they rely on the how can I put it? They rely on the goodwill of the West to surrender Ukraine's sovereignty, and and to get the most that they can get out of the West. This has always been Russia and the Soviet Union's negotiating strategy, and Trump is the guy to do it. He's the guy to adopt Russia's strategy.
As you say, you're very much in touch with those who are still there, who are still fighting on the front line in Ukraine. How concerned do you think that they are and others in Ukraine would be at the prospect of President Trump if he feels that this deal doesn't get anywhere? And it seems quite likely that despite all the optimistic words we've been hearing tonight, it might fall apart. The risk of President Trump simply walking away and giving up on the support that he's giving Ukraine so far.
Well, that support has always been, this is the support that the Trump administration has given is nothing like the support that the Biden administration gave. Even though the Biden administration sort of, had these red lines that they used on certain weapon systems, the Trump administration is using it as a carrot and a stick. One day they cut off all military aid and all intelligence to Ukraine. The next day they come back and they go, okay, we're going to give you HIMARS rockets, or we're going to give you some Patriot systems. And they try to do the same thing to Russia. You can't do that to a dictator like Vladimir Putin because he doesn't care. He wants the entirety of Ukraine, or now whatever he can get out of it, so he can pause and resume the war at a future date. Donald Trump doesn't have anything Ukraine actually cannot live without right now, including Patriot missiles systems. Europe is now providing almost the bulk of all weapon systems, ammunition that's going to Ukraine. Ukraine is producing their own long-range fires, their own long-range weapon systems. I suspect Trump will walk away from Ukraine within the next week if he doesn't get this deal, because he's dead set on getting a Nobel Prize, and that application has to be in by January 1st.
Malcolm, it's been great to talk to you. Just very briefly before we go, it's quite a big question. I mean, what on earth persuaded you to actually go and fight in Ukraine with this international legion of territorial defense?
Well, I went to Ukraine. I was an analyst at MSNBC television, which is called MSN now, in the United States. I was the terrorism and counterintelligence and intelligence analyst for MSNBC. And I went there a month before the war because I wanted to see what the pathways of the invasion would look like. What did the terrain look like? And while there, I went out to the battlefront with the senior commanders, and I realized these people are fighting for democracy. These people are the forward edge of democracy in Europe. And if Russia takes this country, the Warsaw Pact will be reestablished. They will be on the border of Poland. So I joined the army. I quit quite publicly on air, and went out, served as an intelligence officer and as a designated marksman in the 2022 retaking of hundreds of villages back in Kharkiv province. But I did it because I see that these people are our allies, and they are good, and they are people that we should defend. And there are many British citizens who are fighting alongside of us, including the single longest serving Ukrainian legionnaire who has been there since, I believe, March 1st, 2022, call sign Jedi.
Well, it's been great to get your perspective and hear from your experience. Malcom Nance, a former US Navy officer, thanks so much.